Hey, everybody know ain't no party like a Diddy party, so.
Yeah, that's what's up. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
2020, y'all. Yeah. And it's different than when it was 2016. You know, the game has been elevated. As we can tell, there's no expense being spared. We had a black billionaires lunch. Yeah. You understand? Right. And we here together, and we gonna keep staying together. We getting tighter. You know what I'm saying? And united we stand, and ain't nothing else to us. Black excellence.
Happy birthday to me.
I am sure you all know all about Diddy and his parties and everything else he had going on, but years before him, there was another. Now, he wasn't as bad as Diddy, but he was pretty close. Today, we'll be diving into one of Atlanta's most extravagant self-made millionaires, a man who clawed his way all the way up from a modest upbringing to hosting fancy parties with city elites, only to be found beaten to death in his own home. This story has a lot of twists and turns, so make sure y'all stick around to the end. Good day, everyone. I am the Mysterious Black Bandit, and welcome back to your favorite True Crimes channel. If you're new here and you call yourself a true crimes fanatic, you won't want to miss out on any of these stories, so go ahead and hit that like, subscribe, and turn on those notifications so you don't miss out on any of these videos. Once you've done that, let's get to this video. Lance Herndon's story didn't begin with wealth and success. He was born on April 4th, 1955 in New York City, and the only child to Jacqueline and Russell Herndon. His parents were very hardworking people, but they weren't very successful, so they did whatever they could to make ends meet. Now, before Lance even had a chance to get to know the city, his family packed up and moved to Atlanta, Georgia, hoping for a better opportunity and a fresh start. Of course, during this time, racism was in full effect, but segregation was somewhat fading. Their family settled in a working-class neighborhood where opportunities were very limited. Now, his mother, Jackie, was a very determined woman and poured a lot of energy into raising him, teaching him that hard work could overcome anything and he could become whatever he wanted to be. But as for his father, Russell, his role wasn't very clear. There were a couple articles out there that said the father actually left, but I wasn't able to confirm that, so I just left it out. Now, the one thing that was clear is that money was tight, and Lance grew up knowing what it felt like to want more, and this is basically what pushed him to become a mogul. Now, Lance was considered to be a very bright kid who was always messing around with gadgets. He would take radios apart or whatever he could get his hands on just to figure out how they worked. This is basically where his love for technology came from. After high school, he wanted to attend college to learn more about technology, but just like most black families back then, his parents just didn't have the money to send him. So instead, he started working and taking whatever he could just to bring in some money. By the 1970s, Atlanta was becoming the mecca for black opportunities, and Lance saw how everything was changing. Now, at the time, computers were just coming out, and while most people didn't have a clue as to how they worked, Lance was determined to figure it out and taught himself everything about them. Now, he wasn't just doing this for fun. It was like he knew that computers were about to take over, so he was planning on doing something big, something that would change his life and his family's life forever. In the late 80s, early 90s, personal computers were hitting offices fast, and since Lance had trained himself on how to use them, he created a tech support / computer consulting business called Access Incorporated and decided to help other businesses figure out how to set them up, fix them, or just keep them running. The timing of this service was freaking perfect. By the early 90s, Atlanta was gearing up for the 1996 Olympics, and giants like Coca-Cola, Delta Airlines, and Bell South needed modern, faster systems, so they all jumped on board. With Lance's charm and tech savviness, he landed contract after contract. By 1996, at 41, Lance owned a multi-million-dollar firm and was considered an elite in the tech industry. Now, despite all the success Lance had acquired, he had one problem. He was a ladies' man. He had been married once and they had a son a year or two later, but that marriage didn't last long. Lance was out there living like a star. flying airplanes, collecting cars, throwing these wild, elaborate parties that drew politicians and celebrities, and he was also juggling several girlfriends. At his big 41st birthday bash in '96 at the Hiltons, he met this woman named Dionne Baugh, a young 29-year-old Jamaican immigrant who was married to a Jamaican pilot, but at the time they were separated. Now, this event was a closed-door celebration reserved for Atlanta's top-tier business owners and the wealthy elites. Invitations were mailed out by Lance's assistant to a select few that included the company that Dionne was working for as an executive assistant. One day, while sorting through the office mail, she spotted the invite addressed to her boss and decided to look up and see who this guy was. Of course, what she found grabbed her attention. This wasn't just any party. It was going to be a room full of Atlanta's richest and most influential men. And she knew she wasn't going to miss out on this. So what she did was contacted Lance's assistant and told him that the invitation had been misplaced. Without a question, his assistant faxed over a whole new copy. The night of the party, Dionne pulled up to the venue and handed the security the invitation. Her name wasn't on the official list, but with her good looks and knowing how to persuade men, she talked herself right through the door, and the rest is history. Now, after that night, Lance and Dionne hit it off pretty fast, and within weeks, they were already messing around. Lance was sending her lavish gifts like Mercedes-Benz and also let her have access to his credit card. Of course, with all these gifts and letting her spend whatever she wanted to spend, she fell hard for him, thinking that they were going to be together forever and have this loving family. But what she didn't know is that for Lance, she was just another one of his victims. For a good 4 months or so, everything was going good between the two, but suddenly she saw his true nature. Around July, Dionne had went to visit Lance at his home unexpected and catches him with another woman, and she completely loses it. She goes off, calling him a piece of ass and a dog while pounding on the door trying to break it down. Being the public figure that he was, Lance couldn't afford to let his reputation be dragged through the mud, so he ended up calling the police on her to have her taken away. Well, Dionne didn't give two cares about none of that. The following morning, she returned, causing more drama, and this time he had her arrested for trespassing. Now, just like most toxic relationships, they continued to see each other, but she was way too controlling and always wanted to spend time with him. He was basically done. So he began disassociating himself from her, shut off all the credit cards that she had been using, and also tried to get that Mercedes back. What he really wanted was her out of his life so he could get back to living his bachelor's life. But Dionne wasn't letting this go without a fight. Come August 8th, 1996, Holly Stuber, one of his employees, arrived at his house around 8 a.m. Usually at this time, Lance is already up and working, but this day, there was no sign of him. She even tried paging him, but there still wasn't an answer. Now, by 10 a.m., his mother, Jackie, had showed up to the house because they were supposed to go to breakfast that day, but he didn't show. Once she arrived, she sensed that something wasn't right, so she headed upstairs to his bedroom, and this is when she found her son lying naked in the waterbed, deceased with blood everywhere. Someone had came into his home the other night and savagely beat him to death. After the police arrived, they immediately noticed that something strange was going on. 3 of his alarm clocks had been unplugged, with one of them stuck on 4:10 a.m. A porn tape was in the VCR on pause, and a photo of his recent girlfriend, Kathy Collins, was face down on the nightstand. Now, Lance took around 9 to 10 hits in the head and face, but here's the thing. He didn't have any defense wounds on his hands or arms, which suggested that maybe he was asleep when the murder happened. The investigators also noticed that downstairs, there were several gum wrappers scattered near the garage, a pricey laptop was gone, and a big crescent wrench that was usually kept on the inside was missing as well. What made this whole thing so strange is that there were no busted windows or kicked-in doors, so whoever took Lance's life had to know him. Now, because of the heater in his waterbed, it was hard for them to determine the exact time he had died because it had kept his body temperature from falling below 87 degrees. However, after they performed the autopsy, it was estimated that he had been dead for about 6 to 8 hours by the time his body was discovered shortly after 10 a.m. Now, once the investigators started digging, they realized that Lance's world was a gold mine for motives. At the time, there were others who opened up similar businesses, so investigators thought maybe one of his rivals could have wanted him gone, but that didn't fit the narrative. First, they checked with his ex-wife, who would have gained $1 million from his life insurance, but she had a pretty solid alibi. Then they reached out to Kathy Collins, the so-called girlfriend in the flip photo, to see where she was on that night. But it turns out that she was out on a date with a whole nother man. With those two out of the picture, they zeroed in on the person who had just had an altercation with him just a few weeks ago. Now, the night before he died, Dionne had called him 3 times, leaving messages raging about him not answering the phone. Then, when they tested under Lance's fingernails, they found her DNA. Now, when they spoke with one of Lance's close friends, he revealed that the night before Lance was killed, Lance mentioned that Dionne wanted to come over to his house to talk about the trespassing case he had against her. She was due in court the next day and wanted him to drop the charges, but he had no intentions to do so. Although all the evidence was pointing at Dionne, they couldn't arrest her due to the lack of evidence, but instead they went to her house to question her. Now, when they arrived, no one answered the door, so they went to the neighbor's house and spoke with them. After the investigators left, Dionne went over to the neighbor's house and asked them what did the police want. She told him that when the police was knocking at her door, she was in the shower, but considering that she was wearing a business suit, her hair was completely dry, and she had on full daytime makeup, they felt that she was lying. So once Dionne left, they reached back out to the police and told them that she had just left their house. About 20 minutes or so after the police arrived back at Dionne's house, she returned, and when they told her the news about Lance's death, she got all hysterical and collapsed on the ground, but they noticed that not one tear came from her eyes. After they had finished talking to her, they requested that she come into the station for further questioning. On August 17, 1996, Dionne had arrived at the station for questioning, and they asked her again if she knew anything about Lance's death.
I remember one time him and I were in the car, and he actually asked me to leave the car so he could place a call.
Did he really?
Mm-hmm.
But I think you probably went to his house, because we have proof that he was at his house. There's no way you could have.
But I never. Do I need to get an attorney?
And there's about 4 people that swear that he was at his house working in his office until 10:30.
Until 10:30. I don't know what to tell you. I know he came over there, he gave me the computer, and he gave me the credit card, and then he left. I've gone over in my mind so many times, I wish I'd let him stay with me. I wish I'd let him stay with me.
Did he want that?
Yeah, but I don't know. I just dropped my daughter at the airport, and I was just kind of depressed. I didn't want to be bothered with anybody.
The whole entire time, she denied knowing anything about it and told him that on August 7th, she had driven her husband and daughter to the airport and returned straight home. She stated that Lance had visited her briefly sometime between 9 and 10:30 p.m. that night and brought her his laptop, which he often let her borrow. But after that, she didn't have any knowledge as to if he went home or where he went. No matter what they said, she stuck to her story and maintained that her relationship with him was good and claimed that they were truly in love. But authorities discovered that her version of the event didn't match what others were telling them. Now, this case had dragged on for a good 18 months without finding any weapons or clues, but in January of 1998, investigators finally got that breakthrough they were looking for. Dionne's husband, Sean Nelson, filed for divorce after finding out about Lance. In a fight, he asked her if she had anything to do with his death. This is when she completely loses it. She begins swinging a bat at him and calling him all sorts of names. Then she says, "I'll kill you just like I killed Lance." Sean ends up calling the police, and Dionne was arrested on charges of malice murder, felony murder, aggravated assault, 2 counts of theft by taking, and financial transaction card fraud. During her trial in March of 1999, Dionne entered a not guilty plea to all charges. Her defense pointed out that most of the evidence against her was purely circumstantial, and even though she wasn't always completely truthful with the authorities, they insisted that the prosecution could not prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Dionne killed Lance. They even tried to point the finger at her estranged husband, Sean Nelson, claiming that he had more of a motive and he could have possibly done it as well. Now, the prosecution argued that Dionne acted out of greed and jealousy when Lance ended their relationship. They claimed that after she killed him, she helped herself to his jewelry and one of his credit cards, in which she used that morning to purchase a $3,000 furniture set.
In this case, the evidence is very clear. And the evidence in this case will show that the version of events given to the police by the defendant before the death of the victim are totally inconsistent. Now, the evidence will show that we recovered this computer after Mr. Herndon's death from the defendant. And we also discovered that she had used his credit card to charge about $3,000 worth of furniture the next day. Now, you will soon discover, after you hear some of the witnesses in this case, that although it may sound like a soap opera, it is not. It is a tragic case of a greedy and controlling woman who targets a rich and powerful man.
They also stated that she was familiar with Lance's sleep and working habits, so she was the one to unplug the clocks so they wouldn't still be going off and attracting attention when his workers arrived. Now, the prosecution also pointed to forensic evidence and said it proves that she committed this heinous crime. Head and pubic hair samples that were collected matched similar hairs found on Lance's bed, and the DNA evidence under Lance's nails were identical to Dionne's. With no forced entries, an untouched house, and Dionne not having an alibi, the prosecution destroyed her defense, and on March 25th, she was found guilty of all charges and handed a life sentence with parole. Now, this wasn't the end. Her lawyer filed an appeal arguing that the trial had errors and issues like bad evidence or unfair ruling that messed up her chances, and requested a new trial. Although the trial judge denied it, he took it to the Georgia Supreme Court, who agreed that the trial was tainted enough to overturn her conviction. This vacated her life sentence and sent the case back for a new trial. In 2004, Dionne and her lawyer knew that if they lost this case, she was going to be serving the rest of her life in prison. So before this trial started, she took a plea deal. Instead of completely denying her dealings within the case, she pleaded guilty to voluntary manslaughter and was sentenced to 10 years in prison plus 10 years probation. Dionne Baugh spent a total of 13 years and 6 months in prison and was released on July 26, 2011. Currently out of prison and off probation, some say that she moved back to Atlanta and is living with family members now. As for Lance's mother, Jackie, she didn't hold back any of her feelings. In 2011, she told reporters that 13 years was nothing compared to losing her son forever. To her, it felt like nothing more than a slap on the wrist. And this will bring us to the end of Lance Herndon's tragic story. A man that came from almost nothing, built his own tech empire, life was cut short by jealousy and greed. So what do y'all think? Y'all believe justice was really served, or do you think Dionne kind of slipped through those cracks? Y'all drop your comments down below. All right, before I let y'all go, I need y'all to hear me out for just a few seconds. These last few weeks, I have been contemplating on a few things with this YouTube or content creation thing and whether I should keep going. YouTube tells us that, or YouTube tells me that if I want to grow my following or get more views, I need to hop on these trends. Although I have tried these trends and it didn't work, I don't care to be in this rat race to see who can put out content first on the same exact thing. Do y'all get where I'm coming from? I'm not sure if y'all mind it, but I hate repetitiveness or seeing the same thing over and over. Anyways, I'm gonna go hard for the next couple months to see if anything changes, but if it doesn't, I'll adjust from there. I just really hate how much control these platforms have over what they think we want to see. But anyways, if you stayed to the end and listened to my soliloquy, thank you so much. And if you haven't already, go ahead and hit the like, subscribe, and turn on those notifications. This channel needs all the help it can get. I love you guys, and I'll catch you on the next one. But until then, stay mysterious, my friends.